It feels like footballers get younger and younger every year, so in order to prove this theory, this is every single literal kid who's scored in the Scottish Premiership since it was formed in 2013. Side note, I'm a little worried the title of this video might get me a knock on the door, so if you could watch it all the way through, I'd massively appreciate it. Liam Henderson. Liam Henderson was just 17 years, 11 months and 1 day old when he scored his first goal for Celtic. And it wasn't just any goal, it came in a title-clinching 5-1 win over Partick Thistle in March 2014. That month he was absolutely flying, so much so that he won the SPFL Young Player of the Month. Neil Lennon couldn't stop praising him, he said his attitude was fantastic and he was always desperate to improve. Unfortunately, he played just 8 league games that season, which is just too short of earning a winner's medal, but he still left a big impression. Fast forward a few years and Henderson was one of the first to start the trend of Scottish players taking their footballing talents to Italy, where he's been on quite the footballing journey, playing for teams like Verona, Empoli, Lecce, Palermo and now Sampdoria. From scoring for Celtic at 17 years old to being the first Scotsman since Graham Souness to make 50 appearances in the Serie A, not a bad career. Robbie Muirhead. Muirhead was 17 years, 10 months and 10 days old when he scored his first Premiership goal. A tidy finish following up on a missed penalty for Kilmarnock in a 1-1 draw with Partick Thistle back in January 2014. At the time, newspapers were hyping him up as the next Chris Boyd. Big boots to fill for a teenager. And Kilmarnock clearly thought they had a superstar on their hands, so when he was sold to Dundee United for $150,000 on deadline day, manager Alan Johnston was so furious he actually resigned in protest. Now Muirhead's career never quite hit those Chris Boyd heights, but he's pretty much been everywhere in Scottish football. Dundee United, Partick Thistle, Morton, Dunfermline, Hearts, and he's now at Livingston. He might not have quite lived up to his potential, but he's built a solid name for being a handful of an attacking threat in the Scottish leagues. David Syme. Just 17 years, 9 months and 12 days old when he scored on his Kilmarnock debut in a 2-1 defeat to Motherwell back in April 2015. Now, I've watched this goal a few times and honestly, I'm not even sure if he actually touches it. It's a free kick where it's whipped into the box, about 6 players throw themselves at it and somehow the ball ends up in the net. But officially, it goes down as David Syme's goal. So hey, let's not take it away from him. And it's not a bad way to introduce yourself to Scottish football, a debut goal to your name, but things didn't quite kick on from there. He spent a couple seasons at Rugby Park but struggled to nail down a place in the team, then moved to Partick Thistle hoping for a fresh start, but sadly, it was the same story, more bench than ball. Eventually, he dropped down the leagues and finally found somewhere where he could play regularly. First at Cowdenbeath, then a long spell at Kilwinning Rangers, and now he's playing at Clydebank in the Lowland League. He might not have become a Premiership regular, but he'll always be in the history books as one of the youngest scorers in the league's history, even if we're still not 100% sure he did actually score. Dean Campbell. Dean Campbell made his first team debut for Aberdeen at just 16 years and 1 month old, coming on as a late sub against Celtic back in May 2017. That made him the youngest player in Aberdeen's history, breaking Jack Grimmer's record. The best part was, earlier in that same day, he'd actually sat an English exam at school. Now, a few days before his debut, he'd already been named Aberdeen's Academy Player of the Year for the 3rd time in a row, so clearly, this was a kid who was going places. Fast forward a year and a half later, and at 17 years, 9 months and 10 days old, he bagged his first professional goal. Aberdeen's second in a 2-1 away win over Livingston. By 2023 though, it was decided he was no longer needed by the Dons, so after spending 14 years at the club, coming through the youth ranks, breaking records, and racking up over 70 appearances, he left. Since then, he's played 86 games in just 2 seasons with Barrow in England before earning a move to Northampton Town just this summer, where he's already become a regular. Owen Stirton. Owen Stirton was also 17 years, 9 months and 10 days old when he scored his first Scottish Premiership goal for Dundee United. And he did it with literally his first touch in a 3-1 win over Ross County in November 2024. It doesn't get much better than that. First touch, first goal. Dream stuff. A couple months later, he joined Montrose on loan and was brilliant. 9 goals in just 14 league games. He's still only 18, but he's already a regular at United, and if he keeps developing like this, Dundee United might just have a serious player on their hands. Ryan Gauld. Another Dundee United teenager who also makes this list is Ryan Gauld, who was just 17 years, 8 months and 30 days old when he scored his first Scottish Premiership goal, also against Ross County. Now, the ever-observant people watching this who probably know way too much about Scottish football for their own good may note that technically speaking, Ryan Gauld scored his first league goal against St Johnstone about 5 months before this. But as it was the Scottish Premier League and not the Scottish Premiership, and definitely not to do with the club it was against, for this list, I'm not going to count it. Now that 2013-14 season was Gauld's real breakout year, the one that got him his big money move to Sporting Lisbon. In hindsight, maybe not the perfect move for his development, but at the time, you can't really turn that down. Now Ryan Gauld is often branded as a failed wonder kid, which I'm not going to do today, cause he has had a pretty decent career in the MLS, and he's been capped for Scotland. The problem is, nobody over here actually really watches the MLS, so it's difficult to gauge how good he's actually become on a consistent basis. James Wilson. James Wilson was just 17 years, 7 months and 13 days old when he scored his first league goal for Hearts, in a 4-1 win over St Mirren back in October 2024. Then, a week later, he wrote even more headlines, coming off the bench to score a late equaliser in the Edinburgh Derby against Hibs. Not a bad way to introduce yourself to Scottish football. Then, just 2 months later, he broke 2 more records in Europe, scoring in the UEFA Conference League against Petrocub to become the youngest goal scorer in the competition's history, and the youngest ever Hearts player to score in Europe. And it didn't stop there. By March 2025, he'd earned his first senior Scotland call-up, and actually made his debut in a Nations League playoff against Greece, becoming the youngest player to represent Scotland in 138 years. He's still only 18, but if his first season's anything to go by, Hearts and Scotland might just have a genuine star on their hands. Harry Souttar. Harry Souttar made his first team debut for Dundee United in May 2016, coming on against Partick Thistle. 4 days later though, at the age of 17 years, 6 months and 22 days, he scored his first ever goal against Kilmarnock, which turned out to be the only goal he'd ever score in Scottish football. Because after just 3 games for United, the big man, all 6'7" of him, was snapped up by Stoke City. Since then, his career's taken a slightly different path to his brothers. John of course plays for Scotland, while Harry chose to represent Australia, thanks to his mum's side of the family. Traitor. He's gone on to play at the World Cup, become a regular for the Socceroos team, and even holds the record as the tallest outfield player to ever play for Australia. Leo Hjelde. Hjelde was just 17 years, 6 months and 8 days old when he scored his first professional goal, on loan at Ross County in March 2021 during a 3-2 win over Kilmarnock. He'd only joined County the month before, signing on loan for the remainder of the season from Celtic, and had made his league debut the very next day against Rangers, in a 5-0 defeat. Tough start, but clearly the Norwegian learned very quickly. That goal turned out to be his only one for Ross County, but his performances were enough to get high praise. Manager John Hughes even compared him to a young Virgil van Dijk. Big compliments for a teenage defender. Now 22, has had spells at Leeds United, playing twice in the Premier League, Rotherham United and now Sunderland. He even featured for 1 minute in their Championship playoff victory at the end of last season. Aaron Hickey. At just 17 years, 3 months and 12 days, Aaron Hickey announced himself in style, scoring the winner in the Edinburgh Derby on the 22nd of September 2019. The teenager's long-range effort gave Hearts a 2-1 victory away at Hibs. Not bad for your first senior goal. By that point, Hickey had already made history, starting in the 2019 Scottish Cup final against Celtic, becoming the youngest player to appear in the fixture since John Fleck back in 2008. A year later, he made a £1.5 million move to the Serie A with Bologna, where he quickly became one of Scotland's most promising young exports. After a couple strong seasons in Italy, he earned a Premier League move, but in recent years, injuries have slowed down what still looks like a seriously bright career. John Souttar. John Souttar broke through at Dundee United ridiculously young, making his debut at just 16 years and 99 days, the youngest player in the club's history. He slotted straight into central defence, looking like he'd been there for years. By the next season, he was already a first-team regular, and on New Year's Day 2014, aged just 17, 3 months and 7 days old, he scored his first senior goal in a Premiership match against Aberdeen. At one point, Sunderland even had a £600,000 bid accepted for him, but Souttar turned it down to keep developing in Scotland. He'd eventually moved to Hearts in 2016, spending 5 solid years there before joining Rangers, and unlike his brother Harry, who plays for Australia, John has become a regular for the Scottish national team. Good lad. Luca Ross. In October 2023, Luca Ross made an instant impact when he came off the bench for Motherwell and scored a 94th minute equaliser against Ross County to grab a dramatic 3-3 draw. Pretty good considering he'd only been on the pitch for 7 minutes. Since then though, things have been a bit quieter for the young winger. He spent last season on loan at Annan Athletic, where he managed 3 goals, and recently he signed a new contract keeping him at Motherwell until 2027. Now he's only just turned 19, so he's still got plenty of time to make his mark in the Premiership. If you're enjoying this video, please consider subscribing. It massively helps out and makes me feel a little bit less like a loser. Back to it. Jordan McGee. On the 24th of August 2013, in just his second substitute appearance for Hearts, Jordan McGee popped up with an 88th minute winner against Aberdeen. His first professional goal at the age of just 17 years and 30 days. It was a dream start, and he followed it up the next week with his first start against Inverness Cally Thistle. But after that initial burst of promise, things didn't really go as planned. McGee found himself in and out of the side. There was a truly bizarre handball that's still replayed by Hearts fans to this day, and by the time he left the club, he admitted his confidence was as low as it had ever been. To his credit though, he bounced back. He spent 2 years at Falkirk, where he became club captain by just 22, before moving to Dundee in 2019, and that's where he really found consistency. Spending 6 seasons at Dens Park, racking up nearly 200 appearances, earning 2 promotions to the Premiership, and even helping them to a top 6 finish. Craig Wighton. Craig Wighton was living every Dundee fan's dream, a boyhood supporter who came through the ranks at Dens Park. He turned down a move to bitter rivals Dundee United to play for the club he loved, and it didn't take long for him to make history. He'd already become Dundee's youngest ever scorer at just 16 in the Championship, but his first Premiership goal came a year later, aged 17 and 20 days, when he found the net in a 1-1 draw against Partick Thistle. Wighton looked destined for big things, having come through the same development setup as Ryan Gauld and John Souttar under coach Ian Caffro. He went on to make over 90 appearances for Dundee before moving to Hearts and later turning out for Dunfermline and Montrose. But sadly, injuries took their toll. In 2025, at just 28 years old, Wighton announced his retirement from professional football, saying his body simply couldn't handle it anymore. Evan Mooney. Evan Mooney is one of the newest names on this list, a product of the St Mirren Academy who made his league debut in October 2024 against Hearts. And just a couple months later, at 17 years and 3 days old, he scored his first senior goal in a 3-2 win over St Johnstone. It instantly put him on the radar as one of the most exciting young prospects in the country. And St Mirren clearly thinks so too, because they've got him tied down to a professional deal that runs until 2028. Still only 17, Mooney's got all the time in the world, and if he keeps progressing at this rate, he could easily become the next big star from St Mirren's academy. Harry Cochrane. Harry Cochrane's story is one of the wildest early breakouts Scottish football's seen in years. At just 16 years, 7 months and 23 days old, he scored the opening goal in Hearts' stunning 4-0 win over Celtic in December 2017. The game that famously ended Celtic's 69-match unbeaten run in domestic football. That strike made him Hearts' youngest ever league goal scorer, and for a while it looked like he was destined for the top. The hype was unreal. He was even linked with Juventus. But as is so often the case with young talents, things didn't go quite to plan. Just a week after that iconic moment, Cochrane was sent off against St Johnstone, and over the next few seasons, he struggled to deal with the weight of expectation. After that breakout year, he only made 9 more first-team appearances for Hearts before dropping down the leagues. Now 24, he's playing for Arbroath and still hopes to get back to the top. Fletcher Boyd. Fletcher Boyd made an unbelievable start to life at Aberdeen. He came off the bench for his debut against Hibs in May 2024, scored in the 92nd minute, then did the exact same thing a few days later at Livingston. 2 games, 2 late goals, both at just 16 years old. He featured 7 times the following season, showing flashes of the same potential that had everyone talking, and by September 2025, given how highly he was rated, Aston Villa signed him for what Aberdeen called a significant fee. Reportedly around £1 million. For Aberdeen's sake, I hope they got some add-ons, because this kid looks special. Jack Aitchison. Jack Aitchison's debut for Celtic is the kind every young player dreams of. On the 15th of May 2016, at just 16 years and 71 days old, he came off the bench against Motherwell, and with his first touch of the ball, he scored. That made him not only Celtic's youngest ever player and goalscorer, but also the youngest scorer in Scottish Premiership history. But despite that fairy tale debut, Aitchison never really managed to properly break into the Celtic side. He went on a string of loans, had a brief spell down south with Barnsley, and even a brief return to Scotland with Motherwell, before finally settling at Exeter City, where he spent the last couple of seasons. Now 25, Aitchison might not have become a Celtic regular, but he holds a record that's gonna be quite difficult to beat. The youngest ever scorer in the Scottish Premiership.